Sharda Jain along with us. So we will be taking you through from a point of what gynecologists should know about Turner syndrome, then related to adherence to growth hormone therapy, especially during this period of time, and also an important thought on adolescents PCOS, where do we stand? So that itself gives in a lot of thought of how this session is going to be a scientific feast. Without any delay, and it's with great pleasure and privilege that I introduce Dr. Sharda Jain, who's very well known to all, who's the founder and secretary general of Delhi Gynecologist Forum. So she's been an eminent and a respected medical fraternity with a great teacher and surgeon, and has been teaching for more than 2 decades in medical colleges such as PGI Chandigarh and Lady Harding. She is an ethical committee member of Medical Council of India and a Teacher of Teacher Award by the DGF 2018. She carries a lot of credentials and baggage with lifetime achievement awards from Foxy, Indian Medical Association, Lady Harding College, DGF, ISAR Delhi, and more. She's also been a very organizational and leadership role wherein taken off from a point of founder and director of Life Care Center and IVF, and also has numerous and multiple great medical social worker services, naming few of them from a national movement perspective, such as Anemia Free India, Save Girl Child, Female Feticide, etc. So I think it indeed explains a lot of how we are indeed having a privilege to have Dr. Sharda Jain amidst us. And she would be in charge from a point of moderating the entire session and also taking this more into an interactive forum. And also we have a faculty expert, that is Dr. Kochar. For this, I would also request Dr. Sharda Jain to please take over from point of setting the tone of the meeting and also sharing your introductory remarks and also introducing Dr. Kochar for the proceedings. Over to you, ma'am. Requesting you to take over.
Thank you, sir. Very warm welcome to all the guests to this DGF meeting. Both the topics are very, very dear to me, and they're also very dear to Dr. Kochar. Whenever I hear him, there is something new I learn from him. People in Delhi hold him at a very high pedestal because he's a A-class clinician and satisfies parents of our clients who reach them. Now, as for the topics are concerned, till yesterday, Turner syndrome had been a very depressing topic, depressing problem for we gynecologists. But now the picture has changed.
No voices coming.
They can have a near normal life because of the high-tech reproductive technology coming in a help. The gynecologists have so much to offer. But we are here today to hear Dr. Kochar to show you the path, what is the initial treatment of these patients so they have a full potential. Now, as for the second topic is concerned, we all are masters in polycystic ovarian disease. But when it comes to early adolescent period, again, we falter. And here again, Dr. Kochar is going to tell us a couple of tips he's going to give in both the areas. Now, coming to Dr. Kochar's background. Dr. Kochar is a senior pediatric and adolescent endocrinologist. He has been trained at Maulana Azad Medical College, and then at London and at Vienna. He had a fellowship in pediatric endocrinology from a great Almond Street hospital, and he had a pleasure of working there for a long time. He has got 20 years experience in the field of pediatric and adolescent endocrinology, and he has started this particular department in various hospitals in UAE. He's been associated earlier with Fortis Hospital, Pushpanjali Crossing Hospital, which is now Max Hospital, and now he's associated with Apollo Hospital. So he has got 20 articles in both national and international journals, and now I will leave everything, the whole platform, for Dr. Kochar to discuss. He is going to touch on Turner syndrome first, followed by polycystic ovarian disease, and we will take the questions. As the organizer has requested, please note down your questions. And I again request you, please mute yourself and be off with it. Right, sir?
I thank you, Dr. Shada, for this wonderful, introduction, and thanks Noah for giving the chance to give me a chance to talk to everyone. So I'm going through two very important topics, as Dr. Shada mentioned, that things are changing now, and we'll be talking about the role of a gynecologist Turner and what is the difficulties when you talk about adolescent PSS and how to overcome those difficulties. So, so let's start. The first topic will be for what gynecologists should know about Turner syndrome. This is just to disclose that I have not taken anything from the company and there is no conflict of interest. So we start with first, what is the definition and the prevalence of Turner syndrome? Then we call the clinical feature, then the diagnosis, the role of gynecologists, the other issues are there. So what is basically Turner syndrome? It is a congenital disorder in female with unusual pair of chromosomes. So you have a very characteristic phenotypic feature are there in these patients. It is basically caused by loss of all the X chromosome or a critical part of one X chromosome, 45X. So you have, this is basically a structural defect which is there. This is a normal chromosome, you have a short arm, you have a long arm, then there's connected by a centromere. This is a normal X chromosome. Now this normal X chromosome, if it loses the short arm, so this is deletion of short arm, it will cause Turner syndrome. If it loses the long arm, it will cause Turner syndrome. There may be a partial loss of the short arm in X chromosome that can cause XY2012 partial deletion. You may have both the long arms together joined with each other, then isochrome X chromosome. Then you have a ring X chromosome. So therefore, all these structured X chromosomes can lead different type of Turner picture presentation and different type. The only thing one should remember as a gynecologist is that if it is an XY, XO, some cells are there, mosaicism is there, XY is there. So these girls will need to have gonadectomy done, otherwise they will land up to have early carcinoma of the gonads. So epidemiology, it's around 1 in 2,000 female live births. The prevalence is 40 to 50 per 100,000 women. The Turner syndrome affects 3% of all the female fetus. So you can imagine it's quite high. But due to the high fetal wastage, only 1% of these embryos survive to term. Now this is a very typical, karyotype which is not commonly seen, but this is how it looks. The chromosome karyotype XO. So you don't have one X here, you have only one X chromosome. Now this is the definition and the prevalence. Now let's come to what are the clinical features which one should know of Turner syndrome girls and adolescent girls. So this is here. They're more normally the height is small, and they have a delayed growth. They have no growth during puberty. That's how they come to most of the gynecologists. That abhi tak iska breast development nahi hua. She has got no secondary sexual characters. Non-functional infantile ovaries. In the early ages, you may find swelling of the hands and feet. They have more commonly have middle infections. So and a chest is broad. This is a very typical finding you'll find most of these girls, broad chest. Then the other feature you may find in this is besides this is the short stature. They have a cardiovascular abnormality that their left-sided aortic stenosis, aortic coarctation, bicuspid aortic valve. They may have genital unitary anomalies, ovarian failure, we know that, renal malformations, then hypertension, hyperlipidemia, they may have hearing loss. Then very common feature you see in this kids are webbing of the neck. So webbing of the neck is very, very common. The thyroid involvement is very common. So another endocrine issue we find these kids are thyroiditis, thyroid problems. So these are something, the clinical features. If you see a girl, we will have. It is not necessarily most of the girls which are coming to the gynecologist will have these features. They may just be short stature or they may just come with delayed puberty. All the mosaic Turner syndrome girls, they will come with only absence of secondary sexual character or they will come with short stature. They may not have any of these features. So these are the clinical features. So what are the diagnosis and cardinal features of Turner syndrome? So basically, it's diagnosed that whenever you check blood hormone levels, you find that FSH is very high, LH is less. Echocardiogram may be required to pick up any cardiac lesion, or maybe they have sometimes repolation abnormality. Karyotype is the diagnosis. Karyotype has to be done in order to pick up. You can even do a prenatal diagnosis. You do an amniotic amniocentesis, or you can take MSN, do the karyotype in that, you will find these cells. a cardiac MRI or CT scan, if ephoguardi is not being able to diagnose, and then you can do a pelvic ultrasound only required in these girls if they have abnormal vaginal bleeding occurs. So the cardinal features of Turner's is that first one, as I told you, short stature, growth failure. So they need growth hormone. Gonadal dysgenesis, infertility, role of gynecologist, estrogen therapy and ART, artificial reproductive techniques. Premature ovarian failure, which is very common in these Turners. Then again, the role of gynecologist, how to manage. So we'll talk about these things in the next few slides. So you have done the diagnosis, karyotype more than cardinal feature seen. Now what is the role of the gynecologist? Puberty induction, transition to adulthood, fertility, pregnancy and medical management during the reproductive years, ovarian hormone replacement. That's very, very important. So let's start one by one. So role of a gynecologist is there. Besides the role of a pediatric endocrinologist, the genetist for genetic screening, the cardiologist for seeing the cardiac neonatologist if the neonatologist. The gynecologist is very important for evaluation of gonadal function, estrogen replacement requirement. So the role of the gynecologist in the following stage, puberty induction, from puberty, transmission to proper feminization has been done, and then adulthood, fertility, pregnancy and medical management during reproductive years, ovarian hormone replacement. So these are some of the things which is required to be done by the gynecologist. Let's come one by one. First of all, puberty induction. So puberty in Turner syndrome, there is most of the common, one of the common clinical features Turner syndrome, absent pubertal development. So therefore, some form of it is seen that 30% of these girls may have spontaneous puberty. So does occur in 30% of the girls. So and out of this 30%, maybe 3% may be able to conceive naturally. But there are very one or two cases reported in the world where the girl has by itself reached final pregnancy complete. Okay, most of them are aborted, most of them are stillbirth like that. So this is there. Then ovarian failure is very common in Turner syndrome. Even after they enter into spontaneous puberty, the ovarian failure will occur and ultimately you will have 90% will experience ovarian failure. So that's important thing to remember. Now, how do you induce puberty in them? Let the girl is now 12 years, 13 years, she's at a certain height. Now is the time you can induce puberty. So you can do that by starting with a very low dose of estradiol. You come to the treatment of what estradiol to start, but you can start as early as 12 years. Start with what the adult requirement is maybe around 2 milligram of maybe estradiol valeriate, maybe 2.5 milligram estradiol. You just with very, very low. Start with 110 to 110 of the adult dose and gradually over a period of 2 years, so like from 12 years, go over a period of till 14, 15 years, keep on increasing the dose gradually. And this will keep on going till the patient either gets a breakthrough bleeding or at least 2 years of estrogen replacement has been given to the girl. So that's how you will induce the puberty. It's a gradual process. Gradually what occurs, normal puberty is going to occur here also. The dose of estrogen which you use for puberty induction, so the doses is in the normal range for young adults. Oral estradiol is 2 milligram per day, transdermal estradiol is 0.1 milligram per day, and injectable estradiol cyprinate 2.5 milligram per month. So you have different. Puberty has started, so she might start with periods. Then after, once she is withdrawal bleeding occur, or you have to add progesterone. So therefore, this maximizing height to inducing feminization is going on. So from gradually she's getting into adulthood. So it should be initiated at approximately 12 years, 12 years, and continued by the age of 18 years when full adult, the girl should look like adult. So during this time, it's very important because puberty induced, they do not have estrogen from there. So you always give them a good amount of calcium, around 1,000 milligram elemental calcium daily in the preteen years and 1,250 in the after 11-year age. So this is important to give calcium during this time and health focus. and eating well, exercising well, because these girls are a little lethargic. They have some psychosocial, behavior problem because they do not have puberty. So therefore, keep healthy eating, exercise habits, and maintaining a healthy weight is essential. So it's important that you have a healthy eating, exercise habit, calcium. You should keep on going and keep on counseling these girls. The adolescent with Turner syndrome, that what is happening to them as they go from childhood to adulthood. So, so I'm gradually promoting the development independent self-care behavior. So this is how you transition from childhood to adulthood in these children up. So you are already given the height. Now the next is to induce feminization. So transition to adulthood now comes very important thing for gynecology: fertility and pregnancy. So fertility and pregnancy is very, very important. Now every girl of Turner syndrome, the mother, everyone in the family is always concerned about the infertility things. This is the biggest challenge they face. They can come, even if they're short, it's fine for them. But this problem of a girl not being able to become a mother in life is a big thing. So this is the biggest challenge they face. So in the past, it was very common, to tell the girl by anyone that she will never be pregnant in life. The parents will break up. They will, like, people will just take them to the gaon or villages and keep them there. So there was sort of, this thing, myths were there. So now this is different now. They have a good quality of life. So infertility is actually poor self-esteem, psychosocial. That's very difficult for the sex in society, and they always have poor self-esteem. Now, they did a survey in USA. They found 88% of Turner syndrome did not have children because the awareness and the lack of, people being told about the facilities which are available, which they can have. There are maybe some Turners with some condition may have contraindications to do certain things, but otherwise there are things that change now. So what are the options for parenting in Turner syndrome? One is to adopt. You go to adoption center and you say that I have Turner, I cannot, conceive a life, I've been told. The second is surrogacy, planned pregnancy, which is carried by another female. So on behalf of the woman with Turner syndrome, so the gametes can be the from the donated, that be from the patient's own, or one which is donated by some other woman. So this is surrogacy. Then there's heterologous IVF. So you have taken gametes from another person, a donated gametes, and created an embryo which is implanted in a pregnancy carried by the woman with Turner syndrome. So this is heterologous IVF. Then the homologous IVF. Use the patient's own gametes to create an embryo which is implanted in the pregnancy carried by the woman with Turner syndrome. So you have now facilities like this depending upon the other otherwise condition of the girl. So you can have heterologous IVF, you can homologous IVF, surrogacy. Thanks to ART now, there's all these possibilities are there. But there may be some patient who may have some contraindication and cannot do it. So we'll just stop. So this is a study which was done in Sweden with girls with Turner. We don't have any study like this in India. In fact, the whole I was trying to go there. There's no study like this in Asian countries. So this is a Swedish study where they did, they did a pregnancy outcome in women with Turner syndrome. So number of women who had given their own oocytes, then they were seen, then the girls with an oocyte donation, then all Turner syndrome. So the pregnancy outcome was seen in all these, girls who had Turner syndrome. So number of pregnancies, 82, here like you can see here, with own oocytes. With oocyte donation was 42 because the number of girls were taken less, more wanted own oocytes, and all Turner syndrome 124. So in the live newborn 36 were there in the one you can see in this live one, and in oocyte donation 31 were live, 67 in all Turner syndrome. Then miscarriage was very common in the own oocytes, 37, and miscarriage was less with the oocyte donation. So 11. So this is this is a one picture of the Navy that oocyte which are donated from others, women who non-Turner syndrome, they may have a lesser child miscarriage and more better pregnancy outcome as compared to the oocyte were taken from the Turners themselves. Now, when the girls with Turner syndrome are having whether heterologous IVF or homologous, so what is the risk to the mother? The increased risk of pregnancy complications there, thyroid dysfunction, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, preeclampsia. This can occur in any woman. But the percentage is much more in patients with Turner syndrome as compared to the general population. So you can see here 6 to 12% of the general population and 40% of patients with Turner syndrome. So this is a very, very high incidence of these disorders and risk to the mother when they have pregnancy. So some may have severe complications such as deterioration of, some may have severe complications such as deterioration of excuse me. So some may have severe complications such as deterioration of coronary heart disease, heart failure, aortic dissection, and sudden death are quite common. So these things can happen, sudden complications, severe complications occur in these girls. So these have to be all considered before talking about pregnancy in these girls. So there's more cesarean section in girls because they're short, so they cannot have a normal delivery. So this is another thing which has to be kept in mind. Now, what are the contraindications to pregnancy in Turner syndrome? If the patient has aortic surgery, aortic dissection, coarctation of the aorta, aortic size index is more than 2.5 centimeter, uncontrolled hypertension despite treatment, portal hypertension with eosinophils and other major. So mostly it is a cardiac anomalies or cardiac issue which are there. If they are there in these patients, then you are little concerned because there might be a contraindication to pregnancy. Now, besides the mother, the fetus also has certain risks. The fetus risks are 20 to 50% of offspring Turner syndrome may have IUGR, they may have low birth and prematurity. So chromosome anomalies are very common as high as 25% in some studies. The prenatal diagnosis must be offered to this, some of these fetuses because to see whether they have more, because they are, as I told you, more common knowledge compared to the general population. And spontaneous abortion is also very common. So what is the medical care during and beyond the reproductive years? The gynecologist has a role to play. So during the reproductive years, that if you find that the patient is not fit to have pregnancy, at least she should be able to have a normal menstrual periods. So women Turner syndrome cycle of estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen dose equivalent to 2 milligram. Estrogen daily is sufficient for most adult women with Turner syndrome, but individual requirement vary from 1 to 4 milligram per day. Ideally, natural estrogen progesterone should be used rather than analogs. And pelvic ultrasonography and endometrial biopsy only considered when the abnormal vaginal bleeding occurs in these girls. Coming on to the hormone ovarian hormone replacement in this treatment Turner syndrome. First of all, now if the girl is 11 to 12 years, you just monitor for spontaneous puberty if it occurs. How you can do it? Just doing the Tanner staging and seeing the FSH level. Now, if you don't find any breast development, you don't find further changes in the breast and all, and find other changes of secondary sexual character, and there is no spontaneous development, then keep on checking FSH. FSH gets elevated. Then you can start by the age of 12 years, start a low dose of estradiol, like I told you. So you can start with, now we will talk about estradiol but there is one case presentation that will tell you exactly. Then by the age of 12 to 15 years, gradually increase estradiol, like you started, about like maybe let's say start with, estradiol validate. So estradiol validate when you started with girl, like with 1 milligram tablet, 1/4 tablet. So after 3, 4, 6, make it half tablet. After 6, 3 months to make it 1 milligram. Then after 3, 4, 6, make it 1 by 4th milligram. Then after 3, 4 months, make it to 1 by 1.5 milligram. So till you go to adult dose, which is maybe 2 milligram. So this is how you will gradually increase it over a period of 2 years. And then after 2 years treatment, you can start with progesterone, or when breakthrough bleeding occurs, you can start with progesterone. So the progesterone, oral microprogesterone is the best option. The dose is 200 milligram a day, 20, 30 of the monthly cycle. If the 3-monthly cycle, then it is 100, 120 days. So 20 to 30 days, you add progesterone. You can start adding Pimlodipine. N is also good in India as well, but you can just add Pimlodipine on the 20, 30 monthly cycle. So the girl will just have a simple period like this, like the normal other girl of 30 days. Then when the patient is from 14 to 30 years, because she'll be come to the gynecologist still. So you still give a good dose of estrogen because this is the time when the estrogen is highest in any normal girl who is not a Turner syndrome. So this time you keep on giving good doses. Some, will like to take transdermal if it is available. Otherwise, you keep on giving just oral estradiol, and keep on, monitoring the endometrial thickness. Now, from 30 to 50 years, this is the time if the estradiol is in order to get osteoporosis. So to prevent this from happening, you pick up a dose which is the lowest dose, which is enough, to prevent osteoporosis to occur, and give a good diet, exercise, maintain the BMD, and you can do a, mammography after the age of 40. So this low dose estrogen providing full protection is 0.625 conjugate equal estrogen. So this is your equivalent to that, whatever it is there. And after the age of 50 years, you know that menopause is going to enter. So in menopause, it will be like any other woman. So Turner syndrome, that question is finished. So menopause, if you find that the patient needs HRT, you can give it. Otherwise, there is nothing required to be done. Then according to any other post-menopausal woman, you found it. So therefore, finally, ovarian hormone replacement, ORT, is basically you are giving between the ages of 12 to 30 years and maintaining it from the age of 30 to 50 years. So this is the clear picture, which is there 14, 13 years, then 13 to 50 years, greater 50 years. 8 to 50 is just like any other. So if you need, normally many of the ladies do not need, so they don't take it post menopause. So maintaining the adult health, it's very important to screen adults with Turner syndrome, annual screening test, thyroid function, TSH, LFT, fasting blood sugar, H1. They are more prone to have diabetes, they're more prone to have liver dysfunction, they're more prone to have thyroid problems. So keep on doing the lipid evaluation, blood pressure, periodic screening tests, cardiovascular evaluation by specialist every 5 to 10 years, ENT hearing 2-3 years because it's more common to hearing problems, bone problems, presence or worsening of scoliosis, see the ovarian function. Then psychosocial adjustment should be there because they have so much psychosocial issues. So this is one thing you must, keep on seeing them for adult health maintenance. Because in India we do not have any, persons, a separate group, which is a separate doctor who are looking after. Once they enter into puberty, they can either be seen by the gynecologist or the physician. But you should have an idea of all these things to be seen as they grow up. What are the psychosocial issues? Psychosocial issues are very commonly, it may be a cognitive, it may be social, it may be behavioral components, but they may have decreased self-esteem, to social function. Mainly it is because of ovarian failure, infertility. Very common psychosocial dysfunction. So what one as a gynecologist role should be that you start the discussion, regarding sexuality and reproduction reproduction options at a very age appropriate levels like 13, 14 about, sexuality and maybe reproduction at the age of 20, 22, 24, 25, depending upon whether the girl with Turner syndrome can go into pregnancy, what are the various possibilities. So these issues must be addressed in an honest and open manner. Very, very important. So that's why, when you approach Turner syndrome, because in the past Turner syndrome where usko puberty induced kar diya, so bye. So it's not like that, things have changed now. So that's why it's a very multidisciplinary approach. Besides the cardiologist, besides the endocrinologist, besides the genetist, the gynecologist have place because they may keep falling about 40 years, 45 years, till they still, they need to take estrogen and progesterone regularly. So they have to be followed up by them. So therefore, the woman with Turner syndrome requires specialist care at all time points of their life to achieve optimal, healthy, and lead a normal life. This is accomplished by multidisciplinary with the gynecologist, very integral part. Let's start with a case, one quick case. This is a girl of 13 years, 5-month-old. She was diagnosed as a case of Turner syndrome. She had a 46 as ISO XX15 45 XO. So this was the picture of many of the fields which are seen and during karyotyping. So this was very typically a case of mosaic. This was a case of Turner syndrome. She did not attain menarche, was referred because of only some pubertal she had developed a breast stage, no pubic hair, no axilla, no menarche. So she was very short. She had a weight of 30 kg, which was more than what was height was there. So mid-parental height of 156, she was 132, so it's quite short. So she had high arch palate, she had epic underfoot, The one of the features of this, Turner's is short foot metacarpal, shield chest, wide space nipples. So she had this her findings were there. So she was typically a case of Turner syndrome. Now the investigation showed that thyroid was okay, the iron was okay, TFC, FHH is very, very high, more than 170. So this girl definitely needs to be started on something to help her. This was the karyotyping which I showed you. The bone age was between 10 years. So the bone age was, none. The ultrasound showed infantile uterus, ovary is not seen, kidney is normal. Echo and everything, heart, cardiac was okay. So this is a typical case of Turner syndrome, high FSH, bone age delayed, karyotyping showing that. So first thing was that she was started on injectable growth hormone at a dose of 50 microgram. No, she was started with a low dose, 25, and then gradually to 50 microgram per kg. So this was there. Then along with that, estradiol valate Porganova was started at the age of 14 or 3 months. So after the age of 1 year, mind it, this was, she did 13 or 5 months, and the age of 14 years, 3 months. So like after 8-9 months, she was started on Proganova. Proganova means estradiol valate. So this was started with a half tablet, a daily evening dose was given. That's how it started. So this girl, growth hormone steroid is a care in girl. All the girls short stature, they need to start growth hormone as early as possible. Whenever you find that the linear growth is coming down, and it is no. In this girl, you see, she's 34 months. She came very late, and 34 months she came very late. So this girl had a bone age 11 year and SMR this thing. So presented a very less. This is a very, very common Indian scenario because of lack of awareness and because of higher acceptability of less height in girls. Parents do not mind it. Many times they say, "ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, लड़की अभी हो जाएगी. This हो जाए stuff is all has to go because when they are short, they can be treated early and they get results. So this girl got result, but not as good if she had been started at day 6 years, 7 years. So this is one. So and the main reason why they come to the clinic is not because of short stature. लड़की छाती नहीं बढ़ रही, लड़की की growth नहीं हो रही. Growth is not height. Growth is secondary sexual character. So this is a common occurrence. So this awareness has to be created among the doctors and among the society that if there's a girl like this, yes, please come forward and do not accept this that choti hai, ho jayega. So growth hormone therapy. So pre-treatment she was going at 4 centimeters per year and 24 micron dose, which is increase of 20-50. So you can see her. This is how she started going. At least she got some height from here up here going like this. So this is the growth velocity is 6.3 cm during the first year of treatment. So it is much better as compared to what it was in the when before growth hormone. It would have been much better if we had started early. Now estrogen was not given initially, as I showed you. 9 months later we started estrogen. So just to give a little advantage, growth hormone alone without estrogen for 6-7 months. But this is a common belief. But estrogen therapy does not. If you start with very low dose, it does not cause any negative effects on the growth and does not hinder the growth hormone therapy. So therefore, you must remember this. Therefore, if you delay it too much, then there is a danger of post binom and acral. Then the stress, because the secondary sexual character is not coming. She's already 14 years old. She did not come here for height. She came here for delayed puberty. So, but you still want to help her height also. So this is something which you have to understand that you can start with estrogen along with growth hormone, but a small dose. So these are the various estrogen available in the market. The estradiol valate is now easily available. Estradiol is not available. It comes the name of Proganova. Starting low dose 0.25 milligram. It's very, very safe, and it is much better than estradiol. I will tell you the reason. Availability is there. 1 milligram, 2 milligram is there. Estradiol is not there. Initially passed by using too much, starting with 2 micrograms. The problem with is hypertension more common, hepatic dysfunction more common. And then there is CE, conjugate equine estradiol, Primaren, which we have used a lot. I have used a lot of it, and in the past, now I don't use much of it. So this is equine origin, and those are 0.3, 0.5, 0.625. So these are there, and along with that, depo-probation is also there. But then there's transdermal patches, not easily available in India. It has started coming, so you just apply it twice a week. So these are the various estriol preparation available. Estriol valate is very good. Why? Because it was, as these patients are having more prone to hypertension, cardiac issues, and so therefore it is not, it is less, causing hypertension, loss side effects compared to the other estriols. And secondly, non-availability of other estriols, so this program-wise now being used more in the market as compared to other estriols. So estriol valate is there. And very important is to start with low dose, because if you start with a high dose, you will definitely get a different shape of breast. To prevent misshaping of the breast tissue, you always start with low dose. So to conclude, girls with Turner syndrome having primary amenorrhea, treatment at a late age of presentation may be considered growth hormone therapy provided enough understanding resources available. And pubertal induction timing should not be delayed by concerns regarding growth hormone therapy. So you should do, like in this girl, we delayed it because we were concerned, but there now all the studies are showing that there is no problem in this. To summarize quickly, 90% of women with Turner syndrome experience ovarian failure. Puberty induction with estrogen should be initiated. Cycle of estrogen progesterone should be given to women with Turner syndrome. 2 to 5% of Turner syndrome may conceive naturally, but the rest will have to depend on adoption, surrogacy, homologous IVF, heterologous IVF, which we discussed. So pregnancy requires specialized care in a tertiary center. Multidisciplinary team must be there. And gynecology is a very, very important part of the multidisciplinary team. So to take optimal care of women with Turner syndrome. Let's come to the second presentation. Adherence to growth hormone therapy will finish in 7 to 10 minutes. Just to quickly mention, this growth hormone therapy is basically a condition where you have to give it for a long time on patient who are short-stated, whether it's Turner or other conditions. Growth hormone. Now, there is a lot of challenge to its treatment success. So treatment success will depend on the patient characteristics, the therapy area challenges, the treatment access, healthcare provision, and adherence. Adherence to therapy is very, very important. Now, adherence to treatment, it means that if you do not get proper, treatment, adherence to treatment, you just drop it in between, do not take proper time, because you have to take this injection daily. It will cause reduced efficacy. Then healthcare costs, because what you're trying to achieve daily will not occur if you give it right after twice a week, thrice a week, and keep on missing. So the factors that influence adherence are personal factors. If I have to take an injection, fear of needles, then social pressure, denial by the child, then treatment, pain of the injection, side effect, duration of treatment. Convenience is very, very important. This will make a lot of difference. If it's easier to give, easy to press, easy to, to maintain a cold chair preparation, and education of the patient and the parents who are going to help in giving the child or adolescent the injection. So that's very important for adherence. Now it has been seen that if you miss an injection, there's a study which is done in many parts of countries in world over, that if you miss once injection per week, it is called as poor adherence. If you miss 2 injections per month, it is called as moderate adherence. Good adherence means you have been taking it regularly, at least 70 to 80% of the time you've taken it. So these are, most of the time it's good adherence, but there are cases where poor adherence. So if there is poor adherence, it has an effect, negative effect on growth. So there is a lower height velocity SDS and a lower IGF SDS if you do not take it properly. So therefore, patients who are taking good adherence, more than 90% of time with injections per year, as compared to moderate to poor adherence, taking less, that missing the injection, they are less bound to, they will definitely impact the growth. So these are studies over United States, New Zealand, Spain, where they found effect of non-compliance on growth, means missing of the injection, not taking the injection at the proper time, what is happening. The height velocity is 60% that achieved by patient missing fewer injections. So some injections which are being missed, their height velocity become less. So there's a reduction in height velocity. In all these, can you see after missing the infection of non-compliance on growth. Spain, 61% low height SDS. So therefore, in India, it's less. Why? Because in India, their system they have, they can pay money through the various NHS, through the insurance, but India we do not have. So most of the patients in India are adherent. They do not become non-adherent. But if they do become non-adherent to growth hormone, which happens sometimes, they can happen with a lockdown period. Let's talk about that. So that can compromise the treatment outcome. So this adherence can improve with the injection pen device. These are injection pen Noditopin 15, 10, and 5. So the advantage of this Nodiflex pen is that it is a liquid growth hormone, refilled. No mixing is required. Very stable at room temperature for 21 days. Once you have started using, you keep it outside also. And you can see the dosing in 3 colored code pens, as I showed you in the previous slide, blue, green, and orange. And there's a large display window, soft cushion. And now there is a study which showed that Nodiflex was very easy to select the dose because the pen was very easy, and it was very easy to inject. And for the healthcare physician, it was easier to explain to the patient as well as to explain to others about how to inject. So it was this why the training was very easy of giving Nodiflex. So that's why Nodiflex was easier to use and self-inject was more easier as compared. So this Nodiflex Noditropin injection. Now during lockdown, there's a high tendency to minimum flow. See, patients are not coming to you. They say we forgot to give the growth hormone. they forget about it. It is not available. We could not get it. So this is very important, critical for clinical outcome. So therefore, treating disorders such as growth should be continued and not locked down during the lockdown period. So everything which is there is no study I have in the population that COVID is more common in patients who are taking endocrine issue are there and their thyroid, whether growth, anything. They're not that they're more, even diabetes they have seen, nothing has been seen in this type 1 diet. So therefore, you must continue as the treatment is there, even during lockdown period. So overall summary, so growth hormone devices, whichever convenient is there is better, and prefer the use of Nodiflex has been demonstrated because of ease of use, and then treatment adherence is better to optimize clinical outcomes if you are giving this. So growth hormone should be continued even during the COVID time. So next is we will be talking about PCOS in adolescent diagnosis and management. This is a topic which is little difficult and very controversial, many things, but I have tried to make it as simple and it's basically the guidelines of the Endocrinology Society of which is one society is there, Endocrine Society of USA, or what you can say, everybody follows that. So what do we know about PCOS till today? Sign and symptoms, there are 3 groups. One is the National Institute of Health, which is 1990. They gave up the definition of PCOS, hyperandrogenism, oligoovulation, or anovulation. Nothing related to polycystic ovaries. Till today, this is the C3 criteria. Rotterdam, everybody knows, most of the gynecologists know. Hyperandrogenism may be there or may not be there. Oligoovulation or anovulation may not be there or there. Polycystic ovaries, plus or minus. But 2 other 3, if it is there, then it leads to a patient of it being a PCOS. Then the Androgen Excess PCOS Society, 2006, they came up that hyperandrogenism is a must. It has to be there. The first they had already said. Then oligoanovulation may be there or may not be there. Polycystic ovaries may be there or may not be there. But hyperandrogenism has to be a must. So therefore, there's slight difference between Rotterdam and the Androgen PCOS, where they said plus any of the 2 of the 3. But where the androgen excess PCOS, no, hyperandrogenism has to be there, then only you can talk about PCOS. This is as the 3 criteria. Now, why we talk about the adolescent PCOS different from adult PCO? Why? Acne is very commonly seen in normal adolescent population. So it does not mean if acne is there that you have PCOS. Irregular menses and ovulatory cycle, very, very common just after menarche in the first 2-3 years of life. So that's very common. PCOM, polycystic ovarian morphology, which is very common. So these are normal pubertal physiological events. So you cannot on these basis say this is PCOS. So the most important thing in adolescent PCOS is hyperandrogenism is central to the presentation in adolescents, unlike adults. So that's a very catching point. So is the presentation in adolescents like adults, hyperandrogenism. So what is hyperandrogenism in adolescents? So it means that if you have a girl who just comes with mild hirsutism, it should not be considered clinical evidence of hyperandrogenism, especially in the early post-menarche years. So like first and 2 years, some girl will come with small hair on the lips or small hair, coming down from the sides, side goes. It does not mean that she is going to have hyperandrogenism. So this is one important thing. Second is moderate to severe hirsutism. Moderate severe means that you're having good amount of hair on the side, you're having on the chin, you're having hair on the chest, you're having hair on the in the navel area. So this is a good amount. This is a critical evidence of hyperandrogenism. This will mean that this girl has got hyperandrogenism. then girls with acne that is persistently and poorly responsive to topical steroid, they should be evaluated for the present hypertension. So you understand the clinical, hypertension, the moderate to severe. So therefore, if you have acne which is responding to local therapy like clindamycin gel or some other local therapy, it is not going to be hypertension. So therefore, cyst acne is not a part of hypertension. Let me make it very clear to you. We'll talk about that in next slide. So therefore, that's why hypertension also you should know what is hypertension in adolescence. So biochemical hypertension in adolescence, hyperandrogenemia, you have to define. So when we talked about clinical hypertension, now we're talking biochemical. That means the testosterone levels. What are the various, androgen? You can testosterone, pre-testosterone, androstenedione, dehydroandrogen sulfate. So the normal value of the testosterone is taken to be 6 to 87 nanogram per ml. The value for free testosterone is 6 to 18 picogram per ml. The value for DHA sulfate is different. So there are normal values for different lab. There we have a kit. So hypertension is defined based on the detailed criteria testosterone assay used. So whatever assay used, you should see that, and you may have higher levels. So if you have a range, like let's say 20 to 20, if your value is 15, that means on the higher side. And if your value is 10, 11, it's okay, that's not fine. So anything on the higher side, that's why they're talking about hypertension. A single androgen level greater than 2 standard above the mean should not be considered evident hypertension. Just one level above 2 standard, that means if the level ranges from 10 to 50 and you are getting 45 one level, it does not mean that you are hypertension, and especially in asymptomatic adolescent girl. So therefore, you are asymptomatic, she has no hair, she has no hirsutism, she has nothing, acne, so it does not mean anything of that sort. Because there are many times I get patients, ultrasound done, they said, sir, isko polycystic ovaries aa rahi, hum aapke paas bhej rahe hain. Polycystic ovaries aa gaya, we see nothing there is in the clinical features, nothing at all. Androgen done, slightly high androgen. So it does not mean anything, the biochemical is what they say. So therefore, asymptomatic adolescent girl without any, and she has no ovulatory problems, so don't worry about this. So ultrasound is not at all reliable guide for this. Now, when to perform this androgen assay? The next question, Ramya, when should I do testosterone? So you should never test for androgen level in a girl who is eumenoric, who has normal menstrual cycles, just a little bit of unwanted local hair. So without an abnormal hirsutism score. So there is a free valence score is there. So if there is an abnormal score, then you should think. Otherwise, a eumenoric girl with normal menstrual cycles with a little bit of hair, it does not mean that you should do androgen. Because if you do androgen, it is not going to change the treatment, not going to make anything in a medical disorder. So if clinical androgen is present with the absence of virilization, then serum androgen are not necessary for the diagnosis. You already have, you have clinical androgen means that you have hirsutism is there, and virilization means not only hirsutism, but you may have, clitoromegaly, you may have other features which is there. So therefore, it is not necessary. So we should do androgen level when you have anovulatory cycles and you find good amount of score, hirsutism score is there, then you should do that. Now the next question is, how do you define? Because we told you it's very common to get anovulatory cycles in the first 2-3 years of life, after menarche. So how do you define oligoambulation in adolescents? So majority of the adolescents, they have a menstrual cycle between 20 to 45 days within the first 2 years after menarche. So if they're shorter than 20 days or greater than 45 days in individual 2 or more years after menarche, that is called oligoambulation. So less than 20 days and more than 45 days after 2 years after post-menarche, then you will say oligoambulation is there. Any cycle greater than 90 days is unusual even in the first year after menarche. So if a girl, as mother says, she has 90 days, then next cycle, so 30 months, that's all unusual. So you must try to find out why it is happening. So any consecutive menstrual cycle greater than 90 days are rare and they do require investigation. So regardless of the year after menarche, normally after 2 years of menarche, if you have, less than 20 or more than 45, you should try to investigate what's going on. This is oligoinnovulation. So therefore, that's very important to understand what is oligo. So there are many times, girls after menarche at 14 started, and in the first year itself, they come with slight here and then ultrasound done. Oh, polycystic ovaries. This is a case of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So PCOS diagnosis and treatment started, and things are started, and things go on. So this is not like that. So first 2 years, just leave them alone and just keep on monitoring how they're going. If it persists after 2 years of starting a menarche, that means something is definitely wrong. Or if the cycle is more than 90 days and again cycle is more than 90 days, that's abnormal. So any more than 90 days, a menstrual cycle is totally abnormal. That should definitely be investigated and see what's happening. Now, very important, ultrasound feature of PCOS adolescents. So we have talked about annulation, we have talked about hirsutism, now we're talking about PCOS in adolescents, the ultrasound features. There is no criteria to define PCM for adolescents. Okay, ovarian volume more than 12 ml, it can be just considered as a bulky ovary. It does not mean that it is PCOS, because you may have 10 ml, 11 ml ovary normally also in the adolescent girls. Then follicle count should not be utilized to define PCOS in adolescents, which is very common. Sir, उसमें 8 to 10 follicle देखे थे हमें और साथ में इसको volume जो है 12 ml है, तो PCOS ही है इसको तो. No, that's not the way to define in girls, especially adolescent girls. Multifollicular pattern. It has nothing in relation with hyperandrogenism. Very, very common, myth is there. If you have, multifollicle there, so iska testosterone level to high hoga hi hoga. It's very common in adolescents to have such features. So it's not a pathological finding. So healthy girls with regular menstrual cycle and without hyperandrogenism, PCM, polycystic ovarian morphology, does not indicate PCOS. So therefore, there is no criteria to define PCM for adolescents. That should be very clear. So it's not a very important thing to do, an ultrasound and see what's happening in there. So imaging and PCOS in adolescents, abdominal ultrasound in adolescents, particularly obese girls, you may not get adequate information at all. So if you do an ultrasound in an obese girl, you may not get a picture at all, and you may think that something is there. Ovaries are, ovaries are large, ovaries bulky. No. So there is no data even till today as regarding the normal ovarian volume and normal this thing in girls who have just from menarche, started menarche and what's first 2, 3, 4 years, what's happening there. So there is no quality consistent data available this thing. So you should avoid, ovarian imaging and during the diagnostic evaluation of PCOS. Okay, patient has signs of hyperandrogenism and ovulatory dysfunction, and ovulatory ultrasound is not necessary. So therefore you have high sign hyperandrogenism and you have ovulatory dysfunction, so therefore necessary. If we use adult criteria, see, because there is no defined criteria in adolescents regarding the ultrasound. So PCM is more prevalent in adolescent PCOS than in those without. So what is the diagnostic criteria for PCOS in adults? There is no consensus. So the required is irregular menses, evidence of hyperandrogenism, whether it is biochemical or whether it is clinical. That is required. Optional PCM or severe cystic acne is optional. Not recommended. It's very common. Sir, ये obese है, इसके ovaries में cyst आ रहे हैं, थोड़े बाल लगे, most वाली PCOS अच्छी होगी है. Obesity is not recommended. Insulin is not recommended. Hyperinsulinemia is not recommended. Biomarkers like AMH, testosterone dehydration is not. Campus migraine is very common in these girls. PCOS, no. These are not recommended. So that it should generally be 2 years post menarche and must rule out other disorders. What are the other things you have to rule out? Hyperprolactinemia, very common. Non-classical CH, very common. Cushing syndrome, you must rule out all these things before you label a girl as just pure PCOS. So these must be all ruled out. Thyroid, hypothyroidism, very common. You can get, acanthasis nigra, you can get obesity, you may get some, irregular period, you may get some evidence of clinical evidence of hirsutism. So it does not, therefore you must rule out these things before you label it as PCOS. So how to differentiate PCOS and this is non-classical CH. The main thing is that the acne is very common in NCACH, less common PCOD. And second is ultrasonography is usually normal, this NCCH, then non-classical CH. And there is more than 12 follicles and ovarian volume more than 10 will be seen in polycystic ovarian disease. Then you will have, baby, basically hirsutism is same, all both of them. And menstrual irregularity is more commonly will be in PCOS as compared to non-class CH. And it is the value of the 17 OHP will make a difference. The value will be very, very high in case of non-class CH, and PCO will be less than 10 nano. So just do a stimulate 17 OHP, you can differentiate between the two. So when to screen for non-classical CH, any girl who is citizen with a high risk of CH, there's a positive family history of CH, she's short with clytomegaly, think of non-classical CH. Early morning cells. So these girls may not be having periods at all. So then what you do is you do an early morning random sample with then see what is happening. Or if the girl does have period, then early morning 17 hydroxyprogesterone during the follicular phase. This will pick up the value 78, then you know it. So what is the treatment of, like in a girl with adolescent who has got it? So it should be a symptom-driven approach. बाल है तो बाल को ट्रीट किया, periods है तो गड़बड़ है तो periods को ट्रीट किया. So it's all symptom-based approach. So targeting the underlying reproductive hormone and metabolism also has to be. So there may be other reproductive issues, infertility may be one issue, there may be diabetes, there may be hyperlipidemia, and all these along with that. So first thing is lifestyle intervention. Weight loss about 5 to 10% of baseline the first treatment. Physical activity and eating, calorie restricted diet. So in adolescents, weight loss started giving calorie restricted diet for adolescent women with PCOS who are overweight obese. Weight loss is likely beneficial for both the reproductive as well as the metabolic dysfunction. Now there are some girls who are normal weight PCOS. So what about weight loss? Does it help in them? So it is likely to be insufficient as a treatment for PCOS and normal weight children. So maybe the girls who are obese, who are overweight, they might help, and it helps both the reproductive and metabolic. There are various regimes like Mediterranean, low calorie diet, intermittent fasting. So we'll not talk about all that, but yes, weight loss strategies begin. What is the pharmacological management? The pharmacological management in adolescent girl PCOS is hormonal contraceptive, SCP. SC as a first line treatment adolescent with suspected PCOS. If you want to read acne, hirsutism, anorexia symptoms, that's the base first line treatment. You will get normal menses, decreased acne, hirsutism will occur with which most of the girls, they come not because of the period, they come with कि सर मेरे फेस में acne हो गया और साथ में बाल आ रहे हैं, इसका कुछ करो. Periods कहते periods कोई बात नहीं सर, वो तो होते रहते हैं, but ये तो बहुत मैं भी निकल नहीं सकती, जा नहीं सकती. So these are the various important for adolescent is the look. So therefore they're very much concerned about this. So it is hormonal contraceptive. What the dose and for how long? There is no consensus. This is a very common question asked by the gynecologist. Sir, how long should we give this oral contraceptive if we do start in these girls? So there is no particular oral contraceptive favored. A longer duration treatment with combined may lead to a lower chance of developing signs of hyperandrogenism as an adult. So if you give a long term, maybe you will not get hyperandrogenism as an adult phase. So there say 2 years, something. But this Endocrine Society guidelines says give hormonal contraceptive until the patient is gynecologically mature. What is the meaning of gynecologically mature? It means 5 years post-menarche. That's what is called as gynecology mature. Or if somehow she is overweight, like she's around 70, 75, she comes down 60 kg, she lost a lot of weight, you might need to make it for less time, and then this is how it works. Is there any role of metformin? A lot of gynecologists ask this question. What is the role of metformin in this case of PCOS? It is only if the patient has got impaired glucose tolerance or metabolic syndrome is there, that means hypertension, hyperlipidemia, acanthosis, other features are there, then you might think it. It is not use a first line treatment, combination of oral contraceptive and metformin. And if only you want to use metformin to decrease the obesity of the girl, this has no role. It may be helpful in patients of adolescent girls who may not be able to take oral contraceptive because of some problem. Maybe they have estrogen problem, they may have progesterone, maybe a varicose vein, maybe something else. So they are maybe not indicated or maybe contraindicated to take the oral hormonal contraceptive. So therefore, in those cases, you might use metformin as a drug. It is more helpful in adolescents as compared than for adults. So these are some studies where metformin they found that decreases biochemical hyperandrogenism and does help in little bit of the bringing the free androgen index down, but as far as weight or waist circumference, it does not help much changes. So most anti-androgens like aldactone and other drugs are not favored. So conclude, PCO in adolescents is different from that of adults. Lifestyle intervention is the first line of treatment. Oral contraceptives are the mainstay of treatment. Metformin only for glucose intolerance, menstrual irregularities in overweight obese girls. That's where you can use it. Thank you very much for the kind patient listening. And over to Dr. Shahadar now.
Thank you very much. Can I have my video?
Yes, ma'am. I think you can switch on that webcam, so ma'am, the video strike on.
Where is the video? Which hand corner, sir?